list.
Yeah.
Maybe
What do
like-
you-
Hi, guy. How
what
are
do
you?
you- Here, one of those.
There's a
pictures
couple
I have.
Oh,
times.
they're
Why don't we
cool.
just do this?
Oh, yeah.
So was that the good news they approved that, the 4 to 5? Is that just?
So you feel it.
There are legal constraints. How is that displayed in this?
Rec center 0 to 1, each year go up 1%.
Okay.
River.
So I think that was approved.
They just-
Okay.
That's why it's been held active now.
Okay.
As I mentioned, doing
Okay.
those 3 stages.
We are missing Paul,
At least I like that.
Yeah.
but I think we should
Yeah, we should.
Thank you, sir.
get started,
That's
because
good.
this might take
I was
longer
paying
than,
attention a little bit.
That's all.
you know.
Who is it, Paul?
Yeah.
That's good.
But I think we need to get started, because this is an important agenda item, and, you know, there's a lot to it, and we can get started, and he can join us when he comes in.
We can assign random things to him too while he's not here.
Okay.
You guys move over waste and-
Yes.
So,
Okay, so I think we're ready.
yes, I
I
think
don't know if we need to go through the whole formalities. We're down
Which-
here, so Eric?
and we don't have anybody from the public here, so I think, you know, we can get started,
Get going.
and Eric, you can,
Okay.
yeah, if somebody joins us, we can work from it from there. right?
Oh, sounds like we're going home.
And there he is, perfect timing.
Thanks. So, as you know, the town board adopted the master plan back in April, and within that plan, there were multiple findings of things that we need to be focusing on and looking at in the future. So, to be quite honest with you, with the opening of the rec center, didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to that up until we opened, and then Wade and I began to dive into the topic and really try to determine what's the path forward. And so we've done that, and that gets us to where we're at tonight, is to kind of touch base with you, understand where we see, what's the number one priority, where are we going forward, gain your feedback, try to determine if we're on the same page, and then if we are, you'll see at the end, there's some things I'd like to do some further research on and then return to the board to discuss and hopefully give you some recommendations for the future. So before we get into that, I want to just quickly share so everybody understands what really makes up a complete park system. It's 7 things, 7 elements, and they are already incorporated in our current master plan. And that's what our master plan is doing, is trying to get us down the road so that ultimately when we're built out, we've created a complete park system. So connectivity, creating safe routes to parks is very important. Funding, so committing to funding a complete park system. Growing, which means building, planting, maintaining parks. Where they're located, ensuring that there's equitable access to the parks and throughout the system to where people live. Activating them or programming them to ensure that there are diverse amenities throughout the park system. Protecting them, making them safe, and then engaging people in the process along the way. So this would be, as a master plan process is, part of the process in ensuring that we're moving along in building a complete park system. So, as you saw in the memo, and I also had attached to your memo the recommendations and action plan that were in the master plan, really 5 key issues were identified. And so what we did was look at all of them, and under them they have sub headers of recommendations of things that we should, issues that we should be concerned about. But we wanted to determine which one was number one. What is the top priority that we should really be focusing on to ensure that we can build a complete park system, but one that is sustainable. Because as we heard through the master plan process from board members, public, staff, building a sustainable park system is really a top priority, because it makes no sense to build something that down the road you can't sustain. Then we're not really serving the public well. So we spent some time, and the top issue that really came out of it, and it's truly based on how fast we're growing and where we're growing and what's coming in the future, is the outdoor facilities and amenities to add, expand, or improve. So that was what Wade and I determined to be the number one priority that we needed to work on. And most specifically on the right, Objective 1.5A, developing a system of prioritized growth and/or funding allocation. under there were 2 bullets, CIP, which is capital improvement project criteria, one amenity over another. How do you determine whether you should build a trail versus a sports complex? We did an exercise with staff 3 times, and that is very difficult. I don't know that there is a true answer on how you determine whether you should build a trail versus a playground versus some other amenity. So we decided kind of, let's back off of that and let's look at the growth of our future parks and thinking about where they're gonna be. So in order to do that, I went ahead and met with the planning department. And so today we're at 24,500. I picked 20 years out because then I'll be 66, hopefully thinking about retirement. So 20 years
It's all
from
about Eric.
Okay, never mind. 20 years out. So in 2027, 10 years from now, we're projected to be 34,238. In 20 years, in 2037, 43,827. So that's an additional 20-some thousand people that are gonna move here in the next 20 years. What does our park system look like? Where is it gonna, where's the population gonna go? All of those things. And then Wade and I started looking at our current level of service standards. Why do we build a park where we build? And so I wanted to share with you our current standards. These were adopted by town board and staff back in 2007 in the master plan that was done then. We have currently 2, and this is how we've built our park system since then. We have 2 types of parks, neighborhood parks and community parks. Neighborhood parks are defined as 3 to 6 acres, community parks are 6 acres and larger. But I will tell you, there are some parks that are like 7, 8 acres that we really treat as neighborhood parks, not as a community park, which is a larger park. Community parks should draw more people, be more diverse in amenities, those kind of things. So we really have basically built a bunch of neighborhood parks. So we have a lot of small 3 to 5 acre parks. The components that occur in a neighborhood park are at least 1 active component, such as a playground, 2 passive components, which could be a bench or a shelter, those kind of things. Community parks have the same components as a neighborhood park, but they also have more diverse amenities, such as a sports field, destination things such as a zip line, those kind of things. Skate park, big destination playgrounds, those things. So currently through
Do
this,
we have that breakout somewhere?
we do, and it's
Is it
in, you
further
don't have it
down?
on you, but I can share with you
Okay.
which parks have those types.
Well, or I'm just talking about how many neighborhood parks does Windsor have
Yes.
currently and how many community
Yes,
parks?
I will
Okay.
get to that. So through this master plan, back in 2007, the goal was to, and this was a level of service standard, to have 7.5 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. We currently, through our just completed master plan, have 8 acres per 1,000 residents. So that's one of our levels of service standards that we currently use. So we're actually
at
above-
current build out.
at current build out, as we sit today.
Okay.
Say that again?
So in 2007, we said that we wanted to have 7.5 acres of parkland
Okay.
per 1,000 residents. Where we're at is 8
2016.
in 2016, correct. We also stated that we wanted to build a park so that residents were within 1/3 a mile or a 10-minute walk of a park. We're at 92%. I will tell you that I would put that up against anybody in the country. That is really, really good. Getting to 100 is probably impossible. We also said that a standard was community parks are distributed within a 1/2 mile walking radius or 15-minute walk of our park, of residents. So when we get into maps here in a few minutes, and I wanted to, when you see maps, and the reason I have it on this slide was so you understand there's some things that we do not include in our park system, such as private parks, because they're maintained by private entities, not to our standards. Golf courses don't count either because they are not accessible by all in the community. And they may be public in that you can go, but not everyone can afford to play golf every day. But I did include the golf courses on the maps that you'll see in a little bit, just so you can see that they take up space. So you wouldn't just see a blank space on a map and go, well, is that gonna be future neighborhoods? It's already a golf course. And then, one other thing I wanted to mention around standards. In 1996, NRPA did away with national standards. They said every community should make up their own standards. So we shouldn't try to build at a New York City park standard or Baltimore or Fort Collins. Or we shouldn't try to be anyone else other than Windsor. And so that's where you see the standards that were set in 2007. Those were adopted by town board and staff, but they can be changed if you wanted to.
I like that.
So as we're going forward, some things that we want to think about, just have in the back of your mind on decisions about future growth. Walkability and access, connectivity, capital costs to build them, and maintenance costs to fund them in the future. Large versus small in location, diversity of amenities through our park system, and open space and green space buffers. And then the question that I will pose to you is, should we change our standards? So what you're gonna see next is a map of the build out after meeting with planning, that if we built at our current standards as we are today, if we continued to build out to 44,000 people. And so the slide you're gonna see up here, you also have in your packet. I gave you that one because it looks a little better than the one I've stretched out on the screen. So I want to point out a few things just so you understand the map. There are, if I can get my pointer right here. Maybe I can. Nope. There are green spaces on there. Those are golf courses in our current parks. Is this one not working on the TV screen?
Probably not.
No, it doesn't work on the TV screen.
Oh,
It works on the wall, but not on the screen.
Ah.
Never mind, sorry. Wanna plug the mouse in? So the circles with the little red dots, if we build out at our current level of standards right now, out 20 more years, we would build 21 parks. There are already 5 in green that are not built today, but we're already kind of, for lack of a better term, on the hook for them. Those are parks that have been identified, we know they're coming, we just haven't built them yet. So like you can see here is Tockencalla, Windshire, Jacoby Farm.
Does that include the new pocket park at 15th?
That is not a park.
That is not a park.
No, I would call that just a maintained space.
Okay.
I have a question. The red dots look way more dense than the other areas. Are those more dense neighborhoods, smaller lots, more people?
What we did was we met with planning, went through the land use plan. So for example, down in here in this area, you've got some commercial.
Yeah.
This area over here, you still see white, but planning department does not envision through the land use plan whether there would be any homes there in the future. That really is future green space over here. Same thing with this area in here. You've got River Bluffs, and then this area right in here where my cursor's at. Again, planning department does not see homes being built there. The big area that I left blank, because we know it's coming, is rain dance.
Right.
So that's future growth. And then most of it is to the north. So those circles represent, and some of them do overlap, but they represent a 1/3 mile radius, or meaning future residents could walk 10 minutes and be at a park. But all of these are neighborhood parks. They're 3 to 5 acres, they're very small. So we would, if we built at our current standards, we would build 21 more parks. 5 we know about, 16 more that we're just identifying on the map. Doesn't mean it will be exactly right there, but that's where we met with planning and said, where would they probably fall in proximity to growth? And that's where we get.
What is the average cost for?
I'll get to that in a minute.
That's over the next 20 years.
That's over the next 20 years. So if we built that, to your question, Christy, we would end up with 29 neighborhood parks, 5 community parks, and countless open spaces. And I say countless in that I didn't total what we have currently, and there's some to be acquired in the future, and I couldn't tell you exactly how many parcels that may or may not be. So I would argue that if we built this out, we would build a complete park system. However, I don't believe that it is sustainable. It's gonna cost a lot of money,
Yeah.
not only to build, but to maintain. So what we did in order to talk about that was to look at the future costs. So we based this on, we just recently built Coyote Gulch, so we based it on per acre cost. So 1 acre costs $210,811.51. The 5 parks we know about, there's only 4 here because Windshire is being built by the developer, paid by the developer, and then given to the town. So we would have maintenance costs, but not capital. So those 5 parks that we know of, the cost is $9.3 million. Our park improvement fund total at the end of 17 is projected to be 8.1, so there's a shortfall there now. If we built 16 future parks at 5 acres apiece, that's an 80 additional acres at the cost we mentioned. That's an additional $16.8 million. We also have out there Diamond Valley to be built out and Eastman Park to be built out. So you can see quite costly when you're talking about the future.
Well, talking color seems like an outlier there that's distorting the 9.3 million. Why is that 31?
That
It's a community park.
That is a community park, but that's part of where the Public Works and Parks facility site is at.
It's a 40-acre site, we're using 110.
And we would, 31. It's
Yeah.
unlikely, that sounds more like a Diamond Valley kind of.
Right,
But that-
that's what it
potentially.
is.
That's what it is.
So we don't have to build that out according to our development agreements, do we?
No.
No, it was donated at that level as a opportunity to build another community
Right.
park.
Because in theory, the development should pay for the capital of these parks, the construction. We should collect
In
enough
theory.
park improvement.
Yes, in theory. So that gets us to discussion points, positives and negatives, and there's a lot of them. I just kind of highlighted some big ones. On the 1/3 model, which is what we currently are at, so if we were to continue to build out from our today's standards, this is what you see. All of our neighborhood parks, all of our neighborhoods basically have parks in them. And it kind of like a community identifying things. So for example, like when you're building schools, everybody wants a little neighborhood school, so the same kids go to the same school with everybody, that kind of feel. So there is a benefit to having parks in every neighborhood. The access is, and I was struggling to just give it the greatest accolades. 92% is just almost unheard of, to have 92% of your residents can walk 10 minutes and be in a recreational amenity. That's unheard of, really. And then higher home values. It's proven through NRPA that the homes that are closest to parks, their home values increase. The farther away from parks, your home values don't increase as much. They don't necessarily decrease, but they don't increase as much. People want to be near parks. The negatives are lack of diversity in our parks. All of our neighborhood parks look very similar. They have the same amenities. They don't create this desire of people to travel to different parks. I give you a great example is Coyote Gulch. I think some of the neighborhood wanted a zip line at that park. I can tell you, where I came from, we had 2 zip lines. That will draw a lot of people. In a neighborhood park, the way it's designed, you really don't want to be drawing 100 cars a day to a 3-acre park or 4-acre park in a neighborhood. So you need to put your amenities in larger parks.
Well, because with the zip line comes staff time as well.
Comes staff
liability
time,
Issues.
it comes more parking, more trash, more restroom usage. You're gonna have neighborhood complaints because you have more people in the neighborhood that don't, quote, live there, those kind of things. So then we also looked at cost to maintain. So I asked Wade, what's it cost us just generically without diving in really deep to maintain our current parks? They range from $3,000 to $5,000 an acre, with the smaller neighborhood parks being on the upper end of that scale. So basically, the larger the park, the less it costs to maintain. So by building a bunch of small parks, there's more travel time, there's multiple irrigation systems instead of less travel time, one irrigation system, those kind of things. And that's without really just diving way down into the numbers, just kind of some anecdotal evidence that having more parks that are smaller costs more long-term to maintain than having less parks but maybe bigger parks. So we said, what if we considered a change in our level of service? And so that's what you see on the next map. We said, what if we changed to 2/3 mile level of service or a 20-minute walk? And what would the result be? What the result is we would build 10 parks instead of 21. They would be larger parks. So when we get to the next slide on cost, I plugged in 15 acres. So they would be larger. And this is where you would see them fall in some semblance on the map. Excuse me. We'd have the 5 in green that we already know, that we talked about on the first slide. We're going to build anyway, they're already identified on the hook, so to speak. And then then 5 others that are larger community parks or larger, 15-acre parks. Again, rain dance is not on there, but you can see when we change to 2/3 levels, these other parks that are existing push out. So that's why there's less parks in the future if you would have changed to a 2/3 mile level of service.
Why aren't you including rain dance?
Because their intentions, from what we understand, is to build their own park system, a private park system basically within that subdivision or development.
That park, do you know?
I do not know.
I think, I could guess they are, but,
So that gets us to, okay, if we changed our level of service to 2/3, what would it cost? So, and again, you have your 5 known parks, $9.3 million. 5 future parks at 15 acres, which is 75 acres. Remember, 16 parks was 80 acres, so it's a little less. It's a $15.8 million. So it's about $1 million difference. Not a great difference, but a little bit different. Now, the one thing that is, if you have larger parks but fewer, we're gonna have connectivity issues. How do you get the people who don't have a neighborhood park to these larger parks? So what cost you're not seeing there is the green space, the buffers, the trails, and how that would change future costs.
Question about that,
Yes.
not just with you, but for everybody. If we took that direction when we're doing site plans and, doing, new developments, when we ask the developers to take that into consideration as they're laying out their site?
Yes, I think, and the reason and the impetus for this, and we'll get into it, the next option as well, is that we're building so fast. Wade and I bantering around, met with planning, and so I pondered that for a little bit, did some more research, looked at what people are doing nationwide. And again, remember in the back of my head, we needed to build a complete park system. It needed to be connected, and we needed to be sustainable. Without that, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. I did skip something here. I want to just quickly show you the 2/3. So basically flip-flopping the positives and the negatives. So I started to think about the hybrid model a little bit more. And so I wanted to kind of show you what that might look like and ask you whether we should consider that as well. Because ultimately, I think we need to build out our system to be sustainable and complete. I don't think that 1/3 amount does it. I don't know that 2/3 amount does it. I really think we ought to consider, and that's what I'm going to show you in a second, should we consider a model where we build based upon our system's need, not on a level of service? Should we back out away from that a little bit? Should we just focus on what is our future park system? What do we want it to look like? What are the needs of the residents? And not say, well, you have to be within X distance of a park, or we have to have X number of parkland acres per capita. Why not do something different that just fits Windsor? So, these are things to consider as we look at the map in a second. What if we just identified future areas of larger and smaller parks based on 2/3? So back out, so don't try to meet the 1/3. Just say, we've done that for our core, and we're gonna build out the system beyond there, knowing that future residents are gonna probably have to travel a little farther than current residents, but the system is not sustainable. Identifying big barriers to access, such as railroad tracks, large busy roads. Those are gonna be hurdles in the future. Getting people to go, so if there's a park over here and the kid has to get across railroad tracks to get there, how do we do that safely if we're not gonna build a park in that kid's neighborhood? Basically looking and saying to the developers as a development occurs, so for example, someone's gonna come in and say, I wanna develop this subdivision, we can say to them, okay, we've identified this area as not having a neighborhood park, but your park fees will go towards this park that will serve that neighborhood. So we're gonna build larger parks that would serve multiple neighborhoods instead of building lots of little parks. And how did that work? And then to your point, Ken, about the connectivity, getting the developers to dedicate green space, trail system, so that if we had a larger park that was serving maybe 4 or 5 neighborhoods, that they're all connected. So that is a big piece of it. And then identifying and obtaining open space and community buffers as identified. And we just kind of, they're really, separating, the open space is gonna separate us from future build out of other communities. So, with that being said, I took the map and I got to thinking.
Oh, well, that's just it right there.
We're done. So I got to thinking, what if we did a hybrid? And so for example, what if we said, well, this area over here is, buffered by a lot of open space, river bluffs, so it just really needs a smaller park. And this area over here really only needs a smaller park because there's a lot of open space in the future and no home building over here. But we know that Rain Dance, for example, is gonna have their own park system, but they're not served by any of our parks. So maybe we should put a 15-acre park here. And then this park up here could be a 10-acre park. And to give you an example of 10 acres, Main Park is 9.1, I believe. So similar size. 15 acres, the cemetery is 16. So it gives you kind of a comparison in your mind. And the other piece, and it came up earlier, Tacancala is a 35-acre community park. So it can serve a lot more residents. So why build a bunch of small ones around it? An example I would give you is Wayne Miller Park is attached to Windsor Lake and Boardwalk Park. We're gonna build another park that's basically right beside that one. So learning from that, saying we're not gonna build right beside Tacancala, it's big enough to serve a larger radius of residents. Or what if we even pondered, maybe these two parks are combined and we only build one and it's 15 acres. What if we don't build this park over here and we slide these 5 acres over here to make that 20? What if we even thought about, well, there's gonna be a school site right there. Why don't we add the parkland adjacent to the school and we have a school and a park in almost in a joint use? So what I'm getting at here is instead of building 16 parks, instead of building 5, maybe we only get down to 3 or 4 or 5, but they're larger. And again, it's identifying the use, not necessarily the level of service, because I think the level of service will take care of itself. Another question to ponder is, Diamond Valley sits over here. At full build out, 44,000 people. Diamond Valley is our sports complex if we were to build it out. If you lived all the way in Larimer County, or if you live down here in the southern portion, or you live in the northern portion, do you think at 44,000 people, everybody wants to drive all the way over here to the east for all their sports? is that the right thing to do? Because you got 40, so we're gonna add another 20,000 people, all those cars, roads are busier. Would we be better off doing some thinking and maybe this park down here also has sports amenities and other diverse amenities. Talking Collet is some sports and other amenities. And Diamond Valley is some sports, but not totally sports. Because if you think about it, if Diamond Valley was built out just sports, the only people that use it are the ones that play sports. What if it had a destination playground on it? Or zip lines, or other things that people would use the park regardless of whether they're playing sports or not. So just a different way to look at what the future system might be.
Well, I'm also thinking ahead, just as an example, if you went to one south down there, proximity to new hotels.
Mhm.
We, destination, people come in for sports tournaments, things.
Right. And we also, if you have
Do
three,
around that.
instead of building it all in one, you
You
can
can
shift
have
stuff
more-
around.
Right.
Two quick comments. When you do, I like that idea, spreading out the sports parks, but I think you really have to plan properly, because like the parking issue and all of a sudden,
Absolutely.
neighbors
Right.
get disgruntled
Right.
about.
There's
traffic
a
in there.
lot of moving parts to this.
Right.
It's more, but I think for us, at this point, where the juncture that we're at, and trying to understand where you may be, is should we really dive into something like this versus what we're currently, the path we're currently going down, which is 21 more parks.
My other comment is, like your 10-acre one up there, I don't know how much building will happen, but that's north of Harmony. I don't think those people will cross south.
And they've
That's one of those barriers that.
Right, that's correct.
Right.
So what we did was, what does this cost?
How many acres is Diamond Valley?
85.
Well, it's 100 acres built out. It has
Okay.
85 more to build.
85 more to go.
We've only built on 15.
Yeah. So if we did what I just showed you in the previous slide,
And that's not on here, right? Oh, yeah, it is.
Yes.
It is. Wait a minute.
the previous slide, if we built 5 additional parks, at the acreage that I just anecdotally put up there, that's 40 acres. Remember, the other ones were 75 and 80. So I just averaged 5 parks into 40, got my 8. That's $8.4 million. That is a savings of $8.4 million in capital costs.
But Eric, does that include land acquisition? Because the current model's got a lot of land being donated by developers to fund all this.
I still think we can still accomplish that. We just identify those locations. For example, if you're a developer and you come in and we don't have land being donated in your subdivision, you don't need to give us the land, you can build on it, but we want the value. Give us the cash for the land. That's what we need to go back. If we're amenable to going down this road, we need to go back and talk with finance and planning and say, can we do this? So instead of you having to donate 5 acres of land, give us the value of the land. You can build a home on it if you
I
want.
just think that, I
It's something to
question whether
consider.
that's gonna work though, because a lot of developers, the land they donate is parcels that are difficult for them to build on,
Right.
but make great parkland. So we're essentially asking to fund, to purchase 50 acres of land in the middle of town to develop parks and put that bill on our development community. I think that's gonna be a struggle. I mean, the land they're donating and dedicating for parks doesn't have as much value to them. But if we're saying your project requires a dedication or the equivalent of cash equivalency of
Mhm.
3 acres or whatever it is, and we calculate that out to, I don't know, $100,000 an
Right.
acre or something like that, that's $300,000 they're gonna have to tack on to that community cost. And I think there's gonna be a struggle there. Or there could be.
There could be.
I don't
It's a
think
valid
there's-
point, and something that what I'm gonna ask if you all are amenable to this is to let us dive into that question and others a little more, because as you can see with this model, we would cut down on our capital cost on building the parks, not necessarily acquisition. And then the piece in here too is, if we don't build neighborhood parks, we still have connectivity issues. We've got to build more trails. We probably have to revisit the trail master plan and determine how are we going to connect these neighborhoods that don't exist yet to larger community parks, so that they can get, to the different locations. So there's lots of questions still out there, because for us, with the question that was posed in the master plan, I wanted to kind of share where we're at and where we're going if we don't change, and then what are some of our options to consider for change? And then, you know, are we headed down the right path? Are we thinking the right way? And go from this.
So Eric and I've had a couple dialogues of this, and it just keeps on hatching more
Yes.
dialogue. One argument about our community could be made that our home prices are the highest in Northern Colorado, valuation-wise. And there is some argument that could be made based upon our standards. In your slide, when you put our standards saying our housing prices are encouraged to be higher because of the proximity of parks. And I think there is something to that
There.
for Windsor. So if you assume that is a potential correct assumption, that because we have so many parks and that has maintained or increased our valuation as a result of our housing stock, if we were to maintain that standard, have you put thought through, and is there anything out there in the park world about, we keep on using the word sustainability, and that could be interpreted many, many ways. I really hate that word to some degree. But if we figure out there's a gap in the ability to maintain parks within our current revenue stream, which is how I define it. I don't know how you go through that exercise, but I've been brain dead on that for many years, but I think it's attainable, we could go through that exercise. Now let's assume there's a gap, because one of our strengths is our home valuation, property tax valuation. Our weaknesses is our retail sales tax valuation, which helps the revenue source of the community. Is there a trend, or has there been, I'm not saying that we're interested in it, but is there a trend to put a park maintenance fee on houses to help maintain homes? So if residents got a bill for $4 a month, whatever, $20, you know, whatever that is, $50 a year, that goes towards the maintaining of the parks under our current standards, if that's the gap.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that is, I'm just using something. Is that something you've heard of that communities are looking
I
at?
have heard of it. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how many exactly where, but it's similar to like a stormwater fee or something like that. There are communities that have done that nationwide.
And much like Christian's point a little bit, I would argue still there is valuable property. When a developer walks in, they want now to build a development that has high valuation, because they can draw and demand more for their parcels. And so to some extent they carve out a piece for the standard, but they really don't cry that much of it, because they embed that into their home valuations for the development. So there's that quandary a little bit. So I think one of the things to be interesting discussion with the developer world is if you went to a hybrid or change the standard, what would be the reaction? And would they say, charge us more, or we're paying enough, or would charge us more to maintain that standard, so that you had the adequacy, because our housing stock in Windsor, we can get this much more, and I know we can get this much more compared to our neighboring communities, and a park adds that much more value to them, or not. So that's one of the dialogues, I think, if you want to explore this, that needs to be done with developers, I think, is what is a valuable park to a development? And then the question for us to wrestle is, what's the value of maintaining a park?
Well, because that's always been my greatest concern, and why, about the future of parks, is it's not about building them, but it's the cost of the continuous maintenance, and which is why, I think we're looking at all these alternatives. And so I understand, and I do think the developers need to be part of this new equation or conversation, but it all comes down to affordability. I mean, I don't think at the end of the day, we create a criteria that suits a developer that suits them at the time where they can develop, because in the long run, they're not the ones that have to carry the burden of maintaining, unless we switch that around where they have to do some kind of maintenance on all these parks they're building. And that's not gonna happen either. And I've also tried to see if we can't change the park fee instead of a park improvement fee to just build, how that somehow can't be turned around to add some maintenance. Or a maintenance component. Because I think it certainly makes sense, everything, kind of in terms of what you're saying, that you don't just build to build, because we have to follow a guideline, a map, or criteria. We build because of what makes sense, or we look at a bigger picture, and I like some of those thoughts and ideas.
I really like the idea of looking at the big picture too, of where we're gonna be in 20 years, like the example of the sports park. Maybe it makes sense to have that spread out, but really do some master planning of where we're gonna be in 20 years, how can we spread things out to serve more people, and the additional benefits that could come from that spinoff.
And who creates the standard for this connectivity? Is that us?
It's us.
Because, you know, and I understand that, but I don't think every single park we build has to have that, must have that connectivity. Main Park doesn't have that, and it's one of the biggest event avenues ever, and it has no connectivity. I mean, it's not built anywhere near a trail.
But I think the argument is if you're taking away these other neighborhood parks, that you need better access for them to get to.
Well, but that's not even part of an argument, because the connectivity conversation is on every single aspect of what we're doing here. I guess what I'm just saying is I'm not so fed into that connectivity. I mean, because I think there are some things that can stand on its own, like Diamond Valley. Diamond Valley, I mean, you can have some parks that have such a big feature or amenity or whatever,
Most people drive.
that people will drive to it or whatever. It's not that they're gonna be, it's not a neighborhood thing.
I think we have to have some flexibility for developers, though. Going back to your point about donating land, I can see where there could be, depending on the topography of the development, there could be some land that they maybe wanted to donate that fits a park and maybe between two developments. I also see some opportunities for connectivity, and I think one of the keys is to be upfront with the developer about, here's some options for you. And each site could be different. There could be some opportunities between neighborhood A and neighborhood B, the developments, to build in some connectivity that connects to our trails. So building in some flexibility for a developer with our big picture, I think is a real opportunity.
Well, I think, yeah, I think to Christian's point too, is that if we start having some of these conversations with developers and we start talking about the cost of either the cash value of them having to pay us or however it all works out, and then you throw on the topic of a park maintenance fee, ultimately, who is gonna pay the cost for that? It's gonna be the consumer. And yes, at some point, it is valuable that people here in Windsor have good home value, but we talk about affordable housing all the time, and frankly, it's difficult for younger couples and other people to move into Windsor because the housing market, there's not much that they can afford. So when we start tacking additional costs onto that by, requiring certain things here, requiring certain things there, new fees, that ultimately, we think that it's gonna come out of the developer, but it ultimately comes out of the consumer, the individual who's buying the house.
As I read this packet, and I think it was well presented, Eric, but, I think back to all the years I lived in Longmont, and they have a big park that has basketball, tennis courts, badminton courts, and all of these things are in one location. And I don't think I ever worried about driving quite a few miles to that destination to have my kids play ball or for me to play tennis with them. And we had a maintenance charge. Never once concerned me that I was paying an extra fee to go to that park, because it was worth it to me.
Get a maintenance fee on your home, Ivan?
There was a fee, just like the taxes. There was, they had the school.
Longmont has police and parks.
Yes, and never thought a thing about it because it was so nice to have it. And now that was 12,500 when I moved there. Now it's 112,000. And now they've added another park that's about the same type of park, where it has everything that you as a family would like. Much like our recreation center now. People are liking that because they can go out there and do everything. And I don't think they worry about paying some money if it's providing kids an opportunity to do something.
And that may be a really good model, but I'm gonna throw one in there that I think is that's not working so well, and that's the city of Greeley, where you've got a lot of big parks that are connected to nothing that nobody really uses.
Well, I can just say just the opposite about Greeley. I went over there last spring and watched the tennis tournament, and I watched what was happening. There were kids
But that's an
coming in.
event.
What?
That's an event. I'm just
Well-
talking about if I wanna get on my bike as a kid and ride to a park.
Well, that's
It's
what I
just,
was
it's just
gonna
hard to
say.
do.
That's what I was gonna say though. I was watching, and there were families coming in and going to different places than the tennis court and taking advantage of that park. Can't remember the name of it.
It's in town, but they got a swimming pool, tennis court, I mean, they got everything there. That's different than a lot of the other parks in town that are just,
And that might have been the one that has 12 tennis courts.
Yep.
Okay, well, but I thought it was wonderful too, because I watched these families coming in.
Sure.
And they weren't coming to the tennis tournament, I was there for the tennis tournament. They weren't, they were coming to do the other events. And Fort Collins, the one park over there, has just about everything you'd want.
But I'm not sure you'd have residents amenable to wanting to add a park fee onto their, if that went to the people.
Throwing it out there, yeah.
Well, and I'm just saying that Longmont never heard complaints about it. And it's just one example, because I'm familiar with it. Loveland has a good park similar to.
If they're paying for it, they're
And
probably
we
gonna
have
have to use
Diamond
it.
Valley, which has all the room
Yeah.
to do
I mean, I
everything.
see exactly what Christian says all the time, even in our small parks. I go by a lot of them during the day, and I don't see a single person in these parks.
Come up to Highland Meadows, you'll see.
A single person.
Wait,
Some of
can I
Well, I
ask
see
you-
some that are not used.
But that's a
Ours is used all the
demographic thing,
time,
where
so it kind of
kids-
depends on where it is. So, which goes back to, we got some little parks that don't make sense to me.
Well,
I had a thought, quite a little bit different twist on this. Growing up in a city, my idea of a park was either the school grounds or a vacant lot. Us kids would go to a vacant lot, get hurt, and that was playtime, we didn't need equipment. Is there, how does open space, green belts fit into all this too?
so if you go back to the map, this whole corridor in here is green space.
Well, I'm thinking more like, let's go up those two circles up north.
Up here,
Yeah.
so we would be focusing on green space buffers between two communities that want that build out.
So like a kid
So along the
could hop on
edges.
their bike and ride down to
Yes.
a green spot and play ball. They can kick the
Mhm.
soccer ball around. They don't have to have all the playground equipment necessary. It's kind of where I'm going. And I don't know how much control we have over
Yeah, our
that.
green belts get used as
Yeah.
football, yeah.
Right, so I think
Right.
about recreational amenity
And
for a kid or a family.
That's where I think it's, considering the park on, it's not a park, the place on 15, that's a developed area that can be used. I think we're underselling that when it's being developed, so.
I
Eric,
think the
probably-
system of trails is what's really important, because I think they will ride their bike. I mean, there's people from my neighborhood that ride their bike all the way to the concert in the park.
Right.
Every week, I'm going, you gotta cross major thoroughfares, your kids are crossing, everything else, and they don't have a problem with it, even at that.
That's why I see some of those, I can see some opportunities where that might help that connectivity too,
Right.
if it's designed.
Well, I'm gonna jump in and say what I wanted to say, but Wade may answer this, and Eric, you may know the answer to it. But how does Martin Lind out of Water Valley, he takes care of his own parks? How, has he been told he has to do that?
Metro District.
Metro District.
Metro District just takes care of it. And I know they've been told, they can't keep people from coming into those parks. That was something that your predecessor told us we had to do. We had to allow, by law, people to come into those parks.
Mhm.
And that's something else I think we have to consider. That's a law. And,
That's the Christie model, is that you allow metro districts to take on more responsibilities, or whoever, and maintain it. I mean, is that one of your thoughts on it, Christie, has been, is that there's more private,
More
quasi-public, private park systems, if the developer wants to put more in. Which would be outside our standard or inside our standard, I don't know, that's a question to be raised.
So, to wrap it up, since we got another meeting in a few minutes, I listed some positives and negatives to a hybrid type of model, which you have. I think the big pieces are lower capital costs, building based on use and not necessarily a standard per se, and increasing the diversity, because if you look at our current system, our neighborhood parks are very cookie cutter, very similar, which is fine, but there's not a lot of diversity for people to go do different types of activities in them. So path forward, obviously we've heard some tonight, and if you've got some more as we conclude, town board thoughts. What I'd like to be able to do, if you are okay with the direction or the thinking that's come out of this tonight, is for us to dive back into it a little bit more. We did briefly 10,000 foot view talk with Pre-Cab last month, talk with them again in December, refine it more in January. I do think if we are going to be considering some level of service change, we need to involve the public. So inviting them to a Pre-Cab meeting such as maybe in February to show them a refined alternatives that we've come up with, get their feedback, at the same time talk with finance and planning to re-examine our fees and see where we're at. And as it came up earlier, is just on capital, is the future growth going to be, are we going to be okay with our park funds from developers? Are they going to match? If we were to build 5 parks and need $10 million, is the development going to be enough? Or are we going to have a shortfall? Is there a gap, as Kelly alluded to? And then, so what do we do there? Like, for example, our park fees are adjusted, I believe, every year based on the CPI. But will it keep up 20 years out? Is it going to keep up with the costs? I don't know. So examining some of that as well, and then potentially returning to you sometime around March, and kind of saying, this is where we're at, this is how it hashed out, these are our thoughts and maybe some recommendations, and we can have another discussion like this. Again, it's planning for the future, but at the same time knowing every time a development comes down the pike right now, it might mean we're building at the current level that we're at, which I don't believe is necessarily sustainable.
So for the next time we talk about this, can you project out what the maintenance cost for the current system?
We'll do my best.
I guess it's just based on the 5,000 per acre or whatever.
Well, I think we can dive into it a little more than just anecdotal, but what
I mean, I guess you can look at, it's almost half as many acres on your hybrid.
yes.
So that.
But now, the one caveat to that is if you, for example, if you built more sports parks are maintained at a higher level than a neighborhood park.
Yeah.
We cut the grass shorter, we have more people using it, so maybe we clean the bathroom more, those kind of things. The parking lot needs cleaned, or you have a bigger parking lot versus smaller, so there's some tweaking to do there, because we'd have to probably adjust for a sports complex or a zip line versus just a playground.
My other comment and last comment would be, I don't know if I'm disagreeing with Christie or not, but I think the connectivity has to happen. If you're asking people to now, instead of walking a block or riding their bike a block with the kids, just let them go, if they're having to go 3/4 of a mile or a mile and a half to a new park, not opposed to it because I think it makes sense, I think you have to give them a safe way to get there, where I can let my kids go on their bikes just like I currently do to go a block and a half versus a mile or a mile and a half. That's.
Well, I'm not saying there isn't any. I say you have to look at each piece as it's presented and as it's independent, and whether it warrants or it validates, or it makes sense, or the cost is there for connectivity. If you develop something so far out, but it's got certain amenities and the cost is, extreme to try to get it, then maybe that's something that we don't, I don't wanna again be fed by a you have to. I'd rather see it
Yeah,
more
it needs to
based
be-
on what makes real sense in terms of everything else that we're laying out here.
But if you're asking 4 or 5 neighborhoods now to go to one park, that may require some connectivity versus a Topping-Cala that's more of a destination. Maybe there's a little less.
Right, and that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
you take a look at each standard that, whichever you're creating there. I think, again, because we've got to kind of wrap up, I think I've heard overwhelmingly, I think everybody's interested in having more conversation and is interested in seeing some other path. I don't know that we know what that path is, I don't know that there is a model here that anybody tonight would say it's this or that. But I think, I've heard from everybody that they think that this warrants, the additional conversation and for you to, I think, continue unless I didn't get anything.
I just had a question about Diamond Valley. What percentage of the cost for maintenance is covered by rental and the summer leagues?
I would need to look at it.
I'm just curious.
I can find that out.
Because I'd be curious to know the percent of time that it's used by, summer leagues.
Competitive versus rec.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can find that out.
And because you had some ideas on cost recoveries too, or I saw those somewhere further down in the packet, or that's something to be thought about with some of these future build
Well,
outs?
I think some of like the sports parks and what you're getting at in regards to rentals or bringing in tournaments and those kind of things, those will help with cost recovery of the ongoing maintenance. But just a park in general, that doesn't really have a lot of cost recovery.
Right.
there. It's the destination ones where you can bring people in, you have a captive audience, you can charge X, Y, Z.
Okay.
And I'll just throw out there that I'm a little lukewarm on this. I think these neighborhood parks bring a uniqueness to Windsor. I think it does promote the, just kind of the neighborhood feel. We'd like to see more connectivity between those, but everything we do that takes away from that kind of starts to lump us in the category of every other big city around us that doesn't have this model going on. And I know there is a cost attached to that, and I'm not trying to skirt around that, but that is what makes Windsor unique, and that is what is attractive to a lot
It's
of
one of our
people.
strengths.
It is.
Yeah.
And that 92% that we brag about is going to diminish.
Right.
And is that's
And that may
great.
be okay though, and I think you have to also look at what are the trends 20 years from now, and what will people be doing, and how will they be utilizing, and does it really make sense to have 22 parks in 10 years, or does it make sense to have some other model of whatever that combination is? I don't know.
That's a good comment, and I think Eric said it, like core is still, it's already done that way. So we're still kind of talking about.
But we're talking about the second half of Windsor.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're
a
right.
whole other,
Second half, right?
Yeah.
It's a whole nother Windsor.
yeah, I mean, part two.
Eric, do we have a system for accepting donations or soliciting donations for the park system?
We do for amenities like benches or those kind of things,
Okay.
we don't have.
What's that?
You're offering?
Nice.
We don't have, and we need one, we've been talking about, like, for example, a Friends of the Park. where People could donate larger sums of money.
Not that I'm saying that it's.
We don't have
going
that
to-
set up yet,
Yeah.
but it's on our radar.
Okay. I think that's a great program. Not that I think it's gonna be like a,
Well, you never know,
Or-
Yeah.
you never know who you impact, and one day that person may leave
yeah.
X amount, that can.
Cause I know there's a
Used
lot of
for
park
whatever.
systems that do have that.
Mhm, absolutely.
Naming rights to the farmer's market pavilion.
You're gonna
Should already
name that for
sign,
softball?
your business was gonna do that.
That's what I'm saying.
$10,000 a year for 5 years.
That's easy.
I appreciate your work.
Went on and-
I thought you were talking
Exactly, it's like, this is 52 extra million dollars laying around. Biggest donation in City's history.
If you didn't get a chance,
Yeah, like in the last 6 months.
that is a thank you letter that was given to me on the first when we opened the pickleball courts. It's to you.
Hey, look at that.
Cute.
Cool. Where are you gonna put
A
that?
couple other ones.
Eric, where are you gonna?
Yes.